the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 13 and verse 45. It's good to see everybody this morning, and today we're going to be talking about a miracle that Jesus performed in Luke chapter 17. But before we look at how awesome that miracle was and the importance of that miracle and the meaning of that miracle to the ones on whom it was performed, we need to look at some historical background and cultural background to understand the significance of it. So Leviticus chapter 13, all right. We have in Leviticus 13 all of these various operations and things like that, procedures that the priests would go through on determining whether or not someone had leprosy. And basically, to sum it up, if they notice a spot on them, they would quarantine them for 7 days, and they would come back and they would see if the spot had spread, and they would do all these various things to see whether or not it was actually leprosy or if it was just some sort of infection or, something that could be easily dealt with. In Leviticus chapter 13, verse 45, they find somebody who has an infection, and he's considered unclean. And so here's what the scripture says. As for the leper who has the infection, his clothes shall be torn, the hair of his head will be uncovered, and he shall cover his mustache. Oh boy, I hate that. And he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. See what's going on? Anytime somebody comes near him, he has to let them know through his appearance. He has to change the way that he does his hair, that he does his mustache, that he dresses. And if they don't watch out for those signs, he has to yell, unclean, unclean, unclean. It's kind of like a spider, right? How do you know if a spider or something like that, or one of those frogs is poisonous or not, or venomous or whatever it is? By their color. Often their color in nature will tell you, hey, you need to watch out for me. And we come up with little rhymes, red touching black, friend with Jack, red touching yellow will kill a fellow, and things like that. Because we can identify threats through coloration and through, if somebody's wearing all black, what does that typically mean? They're in mourning, right? If you see somebody wearing, all white and they have a little belt on, and that belt is a yellow belt, and you have another guy and the belt is a black belt, who might you, not want to mess with out of those two? Right? See? So we use coloration, we use dress, we use these different cultural clues and symbols and cues to send a message to other people, right? In this particular case, this leper is told that he has to tear his clothes, he has to uncover his hair, he has to cover up his mustache, and anytime somebody approaches him, he has to cry, unclean, unclean. Why? Because if that infection spreads, it'll infect the entire camp if it goes unchecked. And so separating himself from the tribe, going outside the gates, was a necessary thing for him to keep the rest of the community safe. But what does this mean for this individual in a religious perspective? We see what it means in a cultural perspective. In this mindset, in the Old Covenant Scriptures, where is God? Where is he located? In the temple or in the tabernacle, right? God is in the temple or the tabernacle. I forgot. I didn't realize I wasn't streaming this here. God is in the temple or in the tabernacle. And the tabernacle, right, it has the most holy place, the holy place, and in the area where the normal folks could go. And so God is here in the most holy place. Well, if you are out here in the court where the Gentiles are, it's symbolic. It's showing that you're further away from God because you're not like us. You're a Gentile. You're not Hebrew, right? So you're out there. Well, if you're outside the city and supposed to stay outside the city, that doesn't just say something about your cleanliness in terms of interacting with other people. That also says something about how people view you in terms of your faith. It's like the people nowadays who, if someone feels like they ought to quarantine themselves because they're feeling sick or whatever, and you have people, you've probably seen the stories in the news of preachers that are shaming people for not going to assembly. One person basically called them sissies from the pulpit because they wouldn't go to worship. Do you see that story? And so think how these people are feeling with leprosy outside the camp. This is more than just a sickness. This is also a spiritual situation that they found themselves in as well. Let's keep going here in Leviticus chapters 13 to verse 46. He shall remain unclean all the days during which he has the infection. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. You know, if you are one who likes to go to restaurants a lot, or to, McDonald's to sit and get a cup of coffee or whatever and meet with your friends, you're probably feeling a little stir crazy right now, right? Imagine this leper, separated from society, put outside the camp. He has to live alone all by himself, just hoping that this infection won't lead to death or a loss of a limb or a loss of, something else. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 14. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This law shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. Now he shall be brought to the priest, and the priest shall go out to the outside of the camp. Thus the priest shall look, and if the infection of leprosy has been healed in the leper, then the priest shall give orders to take 2 live clean birds, and cedar wood, and a scarlet string, and hyssop for the one who is cleansed. And he shall give the orders to slay the one bird in an earthenware vessel over running water. As for the live bird, he shall take it together with the cedar wood and the scarlet string and the hyssop. He shall dip them and the live bird in the blood of the bird that was slain over the running water. He shall then sprinkle 7 times the one who is to be cleansed from the leprosy, and shall pronounce him clean. And he shall let the live bird go free over the open field. The one to be cleansed shall then wash his clothes, shave off all of his hair, bathe in water, and be clean. Now afterward he may enter the camp, but he shall stay outside his tent for 7 days. It shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave off all of his hair. He shall shave his head and his beard and his eyebrows, even all his hair. He shall then wash his clothes and bathe his body in water and be clean. So that's a lot of things he has to go through just to be counted clean, right? Doesn't stop there. Next, on the 8th day, he's to take 2 male lambs without defect, and a yearling ewe lamb without defect, and 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering, and 1 log of oil. And the priest who pronounces him clean shall present the man to be cleansed and the aforesaid before the Lord at the doorway of the tent of meeting. Okay, well, that's good. Well, now we got more. Then the priest shall take the 1 male lamb, bring it for a guilt offering with a log of oil, and present them as a wave offering before the Lord. He then slaughters the male lamb in the place where they slaughtered the sin offering, and the burnt offering at the place of the sanctuary. For the guilt offering, like the sin offering, belongs to the priest. It is most holy. Then in verse 14, and on and on and on and goes. He dips this here, he puts this there, he puts the oil here, he offers the sin offering here, and he takes it there, and he cleanses him. And then he offers the burnt offering and all this. And then if he's poor, he does a whole different process to make this man clean. And he does all this within his means. And he pours the oil into his palms. And he does this. And he does that. Then what do they have to do? Then he goes to the person's house. And he has to clean out all the house. He has to clean out the person's clothes. He has to check and see. And they have to... they have to tear out the stones and all this stuff, scrape everything from floor to ceiling, right? This was not a pleasant situation for anybody involved. Everything there is set in stone. You have all these procedures and processes that they had to follow very specifically, all for the good of the camp. So this man, the day that he's finally better, it's not over for him. He has to go through day after day of ritual and purification and procedure. Then they have to worry about the house and the garments and everything that he's touched, any leather that he has sat on, anything like that. The very stool that he sits on at his house has to be checked and cleaned and even burned if found that it's contaminated. You see? So to get leprosy in this society was not just, I got to be quarantined for 14 days and watch Netflix and, your cool, nice house, To be quarantined in this society was to be separated from your friends, from your family, from your religion, to be outcast culturally, to be looked at as unclean. If anytime somebody comes near, the travelers pass by, and they might want to stop and visit with you or share something with you. You have to say, unclean, unclean, and they have to go away. This is not a pleasant thing. And so put yourself into someone who has leprosy's shoes. Let's say that you have leprosy. You're all here on Sunday, right? Even though the government has said that you should abstain from going to gatherings of how many people or more, 10 or more, right? And why are we all here? Because this is what we feel like, we need to do every Sunday. We have to come in and worship and study together and fellowship with one another. And it's not like we're trying to follow some strict, rigid command. It's that we want to do this. This is what gets us through the week. It's what helps face the next day. So imagine if you were told you have to stay home. That's awful, isn't it? And so for someone like these lepers that we're about to read about, they are going through that, but times 100. And then once they get done, they can't just enter back into society. They have to go through day after day of procedure just to make sure that they're fit to return to society so that they don't infect anybody else. Okay? So now let's read the story of the cleansing of the lepers in Luke 17, 11 and following. Luke 17, 11 and following. We're going to go 11 through verse 19. While he was on the way to Jerusalem, he was passing between Samaria and Galilee. And he entered a village, and 10 leprous men who stood at a distance met him. So they're maintaining their distance. And they raised their voices, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. You see can you just read into the tone of their voice there in verse 13? Do you see the agony and the pain and the loneliness and the heartache, the desire to return back to society? When they're saying have mercy on us, it's not because they just feel ill. It's because their entire life has been transformed and they've been separated from everybody that they know and love, right? So when they say, Jesus, have mercy on us, that is coming from the deepest place in their soul. And so when he sees them in verse 14, he says to them, go and show yourselves to the priests. And so he hasn't healed them yet. He simply says, go show yourselves to the priest. And as they were going, they were cleansed. If that were to happen, if you were to go to the priest to have your, checkup to see if you could go back into society so he could determine, the state of your leprosy, and on your way there you're cleansed. That's not just a visual thing that takes place. That's a burden that's just lifted off your shoulders. And what would you do in that situation if you realized what had happened? You'd probably turn around and sprint back to the man who helped you out, because he has not just made you feel better, he's given you your entire life back. He's given you the ability to enter back into the temple, into your place of worship, to enter back into society. And so in verse 15 we read, now one of them, when he saw that he had been healed, turned back, glorifying God with a loud voice. So it's not as if the other people didn't know about it, right? But they didn't have the gratitude that this man had. When he fell on his face at his feet, and he fell on his face at his feet, giving thanks to him. And then verse 16 adds, and he was a Samaritan. What is Luke trying to do here? See, Luke isn't just telling a story about lepers. He's also telling a story about thankfulness, and how these other 9 lepers who were not thankful were apparently Jewish. And this man was thankful, and he's Samaritan. So this isn't just a story about Jesus cleansing lepers. This is also a story about other types of outcasts as well. Jesus isn't just cleansing people of leprosy. He's also teaching a story about the tension between the Samaritans and the Jews, right? So this isn't just about people being outcast for illnesses. This is people being outcast because of their nationality, because of their background. See, Jesus is healing more here than physical ailments. He's healing tensions between the Jewish people and the Samaritans, between Jewish people and eventually Gentiles. So you see there's other stories going on within this story. Otherwise, why would Luke point out this fact that he was a Samaritan? And so in verse 17, Jesus may return to give glory to God, except this foreigner. So even Jesus points out these other 9 people who were Jewish, they didn't return, but the Samaritan did. Again, he's talking about more than just physical ailments here. We have social outcasts because of nationality being brought into the discussion. And then Jesus says this in verse 19. It says, stand up and go. Your faith has made you well. Or your faith has saved you. The word well there in verse 19. Let's see. Trying to pull it up here so you can see it for yourself. Your faith has made you well. The word made you well here means to deliver, to protect, to heal, to preserve, to save, to make whole. And so the other people, they were made whole, but this man's made whole in a whole different way now. Not only has he been cleansed of his leprosy, but now he's been made well spiritually. You have been saved spiritually here in verse 19. This is again interesting because this Samaritan is not of the Jewish race, right? He's looked down upon as being less than or outcast. But like the woman at the well in John chapter 4, Jesus extends mercy to those who are sinners, to those who are harlots, to the publicans, and also to the Samaritans and even the lepers. Now this calls us to ask questions about our life. This is more than just a lesson about the coronavirus. This is a lesson about being willing to reach out to people who are considered outcasts by everybody else. Who right now in your life might be cooped up in the house because they're terrified of this disease and need you to reach out to them. Maybe don't go give them a hug or lick their doorknob, right? But who needs you to reach? Who needs you to reach out to them? Who now here is lonely? Who might not be outcast because of the coronavirus? Who might be outcast because of their sins that they've committed that are apparently worse than the sins that you've committed? And so everybody looks down on them, but they don't look down on you. But what about the people who look different than you or talk different than you or who are rejected by the rest of society? Who needs you to go outside the camp and visit them, to invite them back in, to show them to the priest, the ultimate priest, who can make them well, right? Jesus. Not the physical thing, the physical elements necessarily, but the most important part, the spiritual necessity that they have. Jesus reached these people because he was willing to go where no one else was willing to go. Not only was he willing to go through Samaria, which is something that they didn't do, they traveled around Samaria, but he was willing to go to this camp of lepers, people who are considered ceremonially unclean, and even culturally unclean because there's a Samaritan among them. And it was in that chance that he took that he was able to show them mercy. But we are not able to show people mercy and invite people in because we don't often take the chances that Jesus took to go to the people that no one else would go to assist the people that no one else is willing to assist because, they're considered outcasts. They're considered outside or unclean. And there's people that dress and act and behave in a way that would tell us to stay away. Unclean. They don't live in the right part of town. They don't dress the right way. They don't speak the right way. They don't behave the right way in their life. And all those actions we've been taught and conditioned as we've grown up yell to us, stay away, unclean. And yet, the only way that we can reach them is if we go to them, right? That's the only way that we can reach them. Okay? So, the story of the cleansing of the lepers is more than a story of just a miracle of Jesus cleansing people. It has a deep cultural significance in what someone who had leprosy had to go through. It has a deep social meaning because of Jesus' willingness to go through Samaria and go to the people that no one else would go to. And it has application to us, and that it calls us to go to places that makes us feel uncomfortable in order to reach people that no one else is willing to reach, that people consider, they're just a lost cause or something like that. This is something that teachers are excellent at because teachers, in many cases, they're able to reach those kids that no one else is willing to. Even their parents have given up on them. And the teachers, we've seen teachers that do that go to the kid that everybody else has given up on and help them out and add something of value to their life in some way. And this is an attitude that we need to take on as well. Who needs your help? Who is outside the camp right now that needs some sort of contact and you could fill that role for them? Who feels outcast for any reason, whatever, that needs you to be the one to go out and reach them? Are you going to pass through Samaria? Are you willing to travel to the camp of the lepers? Is that something that you can do, right? It doesn't. And hey, in our day, you don't have to go walking to go do that. We've got internet and telephones and all kinds of different tools that we have to be able to reach people. If somebody is, familiar with boats, you can even reach them through signal flags. Who knows? Get creative. But it's our job to go to where no one else will, to boldly go where no man has gone before. And the only way that we're going to be able to reach the world is if we do just that. Okay? All right. I'm going to go ahead and pause